Everyone, it is election day in America as Americans cast their ballots to vote for the next president of the United States. The die is between current vice president and Democratic candidate Kamala Harris and Republican candidate and former president Donald Trump. As Americans stand before the ballots, the issues on the table include immigration, affordable health care accessibility, gender equality, abortion, human rights, tax laws. But who amongst these two candidates does Americans think will serve them better? Meanwhile, Nigeria, Africa's most populous country, holds a major position in global economic trade and investment. So what will the outcome of the U.S. election mean to Nigeria if Harris or Trump is elected the next president of the United States? Well, tonight, Oluwaseyi Odufuwa, alumnus of London School of Business and Finance, is also MD CEO, Capital Plus Nigeria Limited, is here to help us make sense of it all. Good evening to you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us on Politics Tonight.
Thank you for having me.
This election has been described as the hottest presidential race in modern history. What is at stake in this election?
Okay, so many things are at stake. You've mentioned quite a few, and the U.S. election is world election. The U.S. president is the #1 leader of the world, so every person, every business, every country is focused on this election. And two candidates, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, neck deep, almost head to head as we speak. And it's very close to call. Though we all have our preferences, individual preferences, but the way it is going is very close to call. And we believe strongly that at the end of the day, the better side or the most populous with popularity will take the day. Even though on a personal note, I have a little bit of preference for Donald Trump to become president. That's my personal preference. And I think it will tilt towards him, a little bit more because he's been on ground. He's planned for it, for a very long time. Kamala Harris came into the fray because of the health issues of Joe Biden. And if you look at the policies, the Donald Trump policy is America first. Donald Trump is more of a bilateral person, rather than a multilateral person that Kamala Harris is. Donald Trump is America first in everything he does. And at this time, if you look at U.S.-Africa relations, it has lost ground over the years. It's not what it used to be before. China has taken over. And that's why you see the trade wars between the U.S. and China. When Trump was president, if you look at his antecedent, it's more of transactional than, corporational, which is the stand of Kamala Harris. And so at this time where the world needs a leader, a true leader, look at the wars in Ukraine, in Europe, look at the wars in Israel and the Maghreb region. It has become, people also feel that it's trying to become World War III. And it's affecting trade all over the world. Look at the sales of wheat. It's the most staple food in Africa. We get it from Ukraine and Russia. And as we speak, it forms about 60% of our intake as Nigerians. Look at the passage, the oil routes that they normally pass to get into Africa to deliver oil. It is a problem now. Insurance is double, and that's one of the major reasons that is affecting oil price, even in Nigeria and all over the world. And so a Trump presidency, we know him. He's a very bullish person. With Trump presidency,
but
I want to believe strongly.
Is that good for the personality of the leader of the free world?
Well, if you say the leader of the free world, if you look at what Trump is saying that, yes, his policies are quite different from that of Kamala Harris. But at this time, I think the U.S. Country, as a country, they need a leader. When I say a leader now, many countries hardly respect the U.S. like before anymore.
So I wasn't expecting you to share your bias. I mean, I was looking for a neutral perspective.
Yes,
but it's fine.
I
because
just
your
spoke about
candidate,
Trump.
I can now say your candidate, Donald Trump, has been
we'll get to the business side.
accused of not playing by the political books,
by
the rules. I mean, it worked for him in 2016 with Hillary Clinton. Didn't work with Joe Biden. But what do you think will happen with Vice President Kamala Harris? Okay,
so for Kamala Harris, a beautiful and astute leader too. If you look at Kamala Harris is going to run, and because we need to be balanced, because any one of them can win.
That's important.
That's true. And we also try to look at the implications for Nigeria and Africa as a whole. So, but it was just my little preference for a candidate. So for Kamala Harris, you know, Joe Biden's policies, that's what she's been selling to continue. And for Joe Biden's policies, they are much more of multilateral policies, which is not bad for the African continent. They formed the AGOA, which allows about 6,800 products to be exported to the U.S., you know, without tariff at all, free tariff, which is a bilateral, multilateral agreement with the entire Africa and the U.S. And that's why I said Trump is more of a bilateral person, where it's a country-to-country relationship. So for Biden, in the last 1 year, our trade import, capital import, is over 6 billion. And in 2023, it was about 4.8 billion. That means there was an increase. But the oil that we import to the U.S. covers about 75 to 78%. And so what are we looking at now? You know, more of trade stability in terms of tariff reduction and more export to the U.S. And that is what the Kamala Harris government is selling to Africa. She came to Africa, toured Africa around, spoke to everybody. But, you know, African challenges too are there. And that's why there will be a tilt in Trump and Kamala Harris. For Africa, the aid is too much in terms of going cap in hand to beg for foreign aid. And that's why I said that at this time, we need leaders who will think out of the box. A Trump presidency will reduce aid and increase trade. That's what we see. A Kamala Harris presidency, you know, China has almost taken over Africa. You know, in the last 4 to 5 years, it has been China all over. And that's why I say U.S. has lost a bit of balance in holding Africa as one, in holding Africa in terms of the largest trade partner. But if we look at the Nigerian implication, if you will permit me.
Before we get there, in a bit, you know, the world is facing so much, a number of challenges at the moment. War, terrorism, economic challenges. Looking at it from the global perspective, who between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump do you think the global community will accept more? Okay,
so that's a beautiful one. And if you look at it, it is during Biden's presidency that the world is facing a whole lot of wars. What has Trump done? That's why I said he's quite bullish. He has told President Putin and Zelensky that once I become president, it will be the beginning of the end of this war. The two of you must sit. He didn't say, I advise you to sit. You must sit on a round table and end this war. He has made it very clear. Right. You know, look at the war in Israel and, you know, its neighbors. He has said it very clearly that Benjamin Netanyahu must come to the table. And I also believe strongly that it will be the beginning of a ceasefire, a long-term ceasefire to enable all the parties come together, sit down, and forge ahead. Because with wars, there can be development. With wars, you know, countries cannot have multilateral or bilateral relationships. And that's why we believe that, you know, a Trump presidency will, you know, take the bull by the horn and get things settled. A Kamala Harris person, Joe Biden, probably because of his health challenges, you know, almost for 4 years, Kamala Harris came into the fray in just about 2-3 months ago. And, you know, she has not been president, but she has, you know, vowed to continue the policies of Donald Trump.
Well, so far.
Well, we won't say she hasn't done well. You know, in terms of Africa-US multilateral agreements, she has done well. She's also a business person. but Trump is more of a transactional person. What are you bringing to the table? What is coming for the U.S.? What is coming for your own country? And things move well. And I think that African leaders must have a paradigm shift, to think of a master plan that will outlive us for the next 20 years, rather than going all the time, cap in hand, to ask for debt forgiveness, to ask for more loans. And, there's no way you go cap in hand. Look at when Trump was there. He didn't even come to Africa. What he did in the 4 years in Iran, what he did specifically was to tell African leaders, if you have a plan, if you have a business, just bring it, let's look at it. And you know what he called Africans at that time. I don't want to mention those kind of words, and everybody got angry. But the truth is that African leaders too must wake up and bring something to the table that will outlive us. Nigeria is a population of about 220 million. We have strength in population. We have depth in population. And it should be our strength, not a weakness for us. But as we move on, we'll look at...
All right, let's go back to the campaigns from both candidates around economic issues and what Nigerians can take away from that. Harris has said a day one priority would be trying to reduce food and housing costs for working families, help first-time home buyers, increase housing supply, and raise the minimum wage. Trump, on the other hand, has promised to end inflation and make America affordable again. And when asked, he says more drilling for oil will lower energy costs. How do you assess the campaign promises, and perhaps what can Nigeria take away from this? Okay,
so Kamala Harris has said that she wants to reduce, but the question is, where will the funding come from? She has not told us. So the funding will probably come from increased tax. And that's another problem for the U.S. economy. Donald Trump is telling you that we will try to reduce inflation by, producing more oil. As we speak now, condensate or shale oil is what the U.S. produce more. And they buy, last year, about $3.8 billion worth of oil, crude that they bought from Nigeria. And he's saying that we will try to produce more. And that is what my own postulations too are, even for the Nigerian template, that, we want to get to a $1 trillion economy. And to achieve it, we need to produce more. We need to free more FX for spending, for national spending. And once there's more spending, there's more growth. Once there's growth, it affects GDP positively. And that's what Trump is saying, that he's going to tax all these multinationals, all these countries doing business with the U.S. He's going to impose more tax on them so that the American citizen can come first. Look at, as we speak now, about 68% of EVs in the U.S. is from China. And he has told China that you are taking advantage because I'm not there. I'm going to increase tariff to about 100%. So, but American companies first. And that's what the American citizen, an average person, wants to listen to. And that's why I think you will have a little tilt, against over Kamala Harris.
So there's something Will Stevens says. That's a Consul General of the United States Consulate in Lagos. There was an event on Monday where he said, the event was about African Growth and Opportunity Act workshop aimed at equipping export-ready Nigerian businesses. So for him, he says Nigerian Customs Service, trade officials, and relevant stakeholders with the necessary knowledge and skills to maximize the benefit of African Growth and Opportunity Act and improve its utilization in Nigeria. For you, talk to us about the 50-50 incredibly balanced trade relationships to the Consul General.
Okay, so it's still part of the AGOA Act that the U.S. is selling, which is under the Kamala Harris administration as we speak. And that's why, she also have an upper hand in terms of Africa trade relations. And so what has U.S. done? They've told us specifically, we'll give you a leeway to export once it meets a certain criteria to the U.S. And just giving figures of export and import figures, which is on the rise, about 26 to 28% increase, and it can be better. And so once Nigeria has that opportunity for a 50-50 balance in terms of export, import, in trade, bilateral trade relationship, I will want to say that the best way is to take advantage of it because we stand to benefit more in Nigeria. And for me, my postulations will be that, number one, we should cooperate more, whichever candidate wins, cooperate more in the area of number one, security. I'll break it down. If you look at insecurity in Nigeria, insecurity is affecting GDP growth to the tune of about 30%, which is high. Insecurity is affecting agri produce. 16.8% of GDP is agri export. As we speak now, 40.1% is food inflation in the total aggregate inflation. So it means that the inflation of about 34 to 35%, if we reduce food inflation to about 25%, aggregate inflation should fall to about 28%. So agri is a very veritable sector that we need to work on. So, and insecurity is the bane of that sector. Look at oil production, 1.4 million barrels average. OPEC benchmark is 2 million barrels per day. Insecurity, is also a bane in that sector. You can imagine if we produce 600,000 barrels more, we get to 2 million barrels. It means that Nigeria will have about $1.2 billion more every month as income, as revenue, to drive growth. So insecurity is a major bane. I will advise Mr. President to work in consonant with whoever wins in terms of sharing intelligence, in terms of training, in terms of also gadget and equipment to fight insecurity. Look at another very beautiful one that I feel Mr. President should discuss, and that's in terms of energy, power. 58% of GDP is the service sector, as we speak. So it means that MSMEs form the major bane of our revenue. And as we speak now, a country without energy or power cannot grow. Presently, 4,000 to 5,000 megawatts is what we produce. This is the first time in the history of this country that our grid has collapsed 4 to 5 times in about 1 to 2 weeks. It has never happened before. And so we should transit from 4,000 regularly to about 30,000 minimum. That will give every Nigerian about 10 to 15 hours power every day. We need close to 60 to 70,000 megawatts to have reserve for all industries. But at 30,000 megawatts, it helps. So we should discuss bilaterally with the US president, whoever wins, in terms of power, bring in your multinationals. Let us have corporations and work together in terms of power production, in terms of also transmission. Thank God Mr. President has done something that is very good. He has, reviewed the Power Act, which we expect every state to domesticate. It allows states to produce and distribute on their own. And I know Lagos State is discussing around that policy to see how they can bring in foreign companies to be able to manage it. Another side is trade. Mr. President should have discussion around trade in terms of tariff reduction, in terms of imports, and also sit down to form new agreements on bilateral trade so that Nigerian SMEs can thrive.
So what kind of agreement will be favorable for Nigeria? That's
what I'm saying. When we see agreements, it cuts across almost every sector. Agricultural agreements, export agreement, but majorly export agreement. And before you export, everything is intertwined. Before you export, you must have produce, and it must be in good condition. And so agricultural export is there. Before you export too, there must also be power. Most of our industries have gone outside of this country. So many of them too are leaving the direct power grid to form alternative solutions to power. And by so doing too, it affects national growth and income. And so Mr. President should look at energy, he should look at trade, he should also look at security collaborations. And finally, I think that Mr. President should look at immigration policies too. Trump has said it, that if he becomes president, he is going to deport, Africans, everybody, and has not come in with proper documentation and the like.
So when you juxtapose that with what Harris has been saying, because so many persons have said Harris administration will be a continuation of the Biden presidency.
True, very true.
By ways of foreign policy. So when you juxtapose that where Trump is or where he stands, what's your take on that?
Okay, so for me, economically, I think the Kamala Harris government will be a continuation of, the policies, AGOA, and all those multilateral agreements that, you know, is already established and is working well. I gave figures to, I think about 6.2, 6.3 billion in terms of collaboration with the U.S., in terms of trade, as we speak, which is good. But I'm only saying that, you know, it is not a Nigerian election.
I know.
It's a U.S. election. I'm only trying to bring out the hearts of an average America first. You know, that alone gives Trump that advantage. But, you know, despite whoever comes in, we should be at the forefront to sit down as a country, a sovereign nation with a lot of strength, to be able to sit down with whoever is there on these 4 major policies to, you know, collaborate and drive growth for
So this
Nigeria.
is from the U.S. site on U.S.-Nigeria fact sheets, and I'm going to quote it. It says, our bilateral relationship is based on advancing shared interests in security cooperation, global health, security, development, and humanitarian response, economic growth, democracy, and respect for human rights. End of quote. Let me ask you, does this ever get to everyday Nigerian on the streets?
Well.
And if it does, how?
Well, it's a banana peel if you say it gets to every Nigerian, you know, because if we are going to talk about that, we'll take it, you know, maybe a few years back. Look at this government. It's a government of, you know, about 18 months thereabout. This is the only government that has tried to take the bull by the horn. The government of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. If you want me to give you some facts, we'll look at it, because at this time, every Nigerian is feeling some form of pain, hardship, you know, very high cost of goods and services, which we know. We are Nigerians too, and we feel the pain. But, you know, this did not start with this government. In the last quarter of the presidency of Muhammadu Buhari, revenue to debt servicing was 98%. It means that 98% of everything we earned was going to service debt. So Nigeria was almost gone. What did this president do? No more subsidy, floating of the naira. Yes, both at the same time, you know, caused a lot of headache for Nigerians. But he had to do what he had to do. The problem is that Nigeria doesn't run a master plan. The reason why Lagos State is working today, and one of the largest economies in Africa, bigger than so many countries, also in Africa, is because Lagos State has a 20 to 30-year master plan. And every governor that has come in has stuck to that plan. And that's why we are here where we are today. Look at, and that's what we expect the Mr. President is trying to work on. World Bank, Vice President, he made it very clear that sustainability of these current plans, policies and programs of the government of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is what Nigerians should focus on. Because there's no way we are coming from a deficit end, we'll get to an equilibrium point before growth start to show. At 2.9% growth in the last quarter of 2023, growth was envisaged to be 2.9 this year.
We would have loved to continue. Okay. Please wrap up in 1 minute.
Okay, so as we speak, growth is about 3.2%. IMF is projecting World Economic Outlook. They are projecting growth to continue at 3.2%, but I'm telling you, because of our own postulations, growth will be at about 3.6. So by 2030, we have a very strong belief that we'll get to $1 trillion economy.
Right.
But we expect...
Sadly, we're out of time. I mean, time is always against us. But I'm sure we'd have more time to talk about other national economic issues. Thank you so much for joining us. Oluwaseyi,
thank you for having me.
Odufuwa, alumnus of London School of Business and Finance, MD CEO, Capital Plus Nigeria Limited. And just like you said, the best men win. All right. Thank you so much for joining us.